So just to introduce the session, so what I want to talk to you about over the next 20 minutes is essentially how you as the employer can start to ultimately connect with your employees and ultimately look to see how you can make your employees more productive, more committed, and ultimately become advocates of your business. So without further ado, in terms of a very quick agenda, 4 key things I want to run through. So the first thing is a quick state of the nation, and some of these points have already been covered off this morning, but I think it's very useful just in terms of a scene-setting exercise. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit around how you can create the connection. So we'll look through the lens of the employee, but also the lens of the employer as well. So look at how you can create the connection and ultimately build this into your wider ecosystem. I'm going to spend a bit of time just talking about well-being, because I think everyone's talking about it and doing something in some way, but I'm not sure everyone's getting it right. So let's have a quick look at how we can potentially break down some of those silos. And then, as I like to do with these things, I like to try and bring it to life, just with a couple of case studies of employers who, in my view, are getting it right. So, quick state of the nation. So, we do live in a society which is always on. It's obsessed by experience. So, you as individuals on a day-to-day basis, whether you're buying, your coffee from Starbucks, whether you're traveling into the office, everyone nowadays is obsessed by the experience that they receive, and everything seems to be measured. So if you're staying at a hotel, after you finish your stay, you'll have an email saying, how was your stay? Everyone wants to know how they're doing, and ultimately giving you as individuals the voice to get your point across. And that's very much coming into the world of benefits as well. So when we think of the technology that we use in the workplace and the technology we use at home, in my view, there's a big chasm between the two. So we'll have a look at that a bit later on. The second thing, and I think you'll all recognize it, it's probably the biggest challenge that you've got right now, is how you communicate and engage with your employees. So how do you actually create that connection? So you can have the biggest, the best, the brightest benefits package in the world, but unless you are truly engaging and communicating with your people, you're set up to fail. So you need to make sure that is very high up the agenda. Wellbeing, as I've touched on already, it's absolutely on the employer agenda, but again, I don't think people are truly getting it right now. I think there's still too much of a siloed approach, and I'm going to talk about how you can try and break those silos down a bit later on. If you roll back to the last REBA session we had, the focus was very much on data, and I think, Gareth, you mentioned the scientists that you've got working at Coca-Cola. I think everyone recognizes the importance of data and how it's going to drive the strategy as we go forward, but actually I don't think people have truly got there yet. We're playing at it a little bit, and I don't think anyone's truly cracked the data conundrum. I still think that too many employers are still taking a traditional approach to benefits. So we had a great round table session, and the clear thing for me was that people are at different positions on their journey to where they want to get to with their benefits, and ultimately some people still aren't clear what they want to do with their benefits and how they're going to get there. But as I say, the traditional approach needs to change. If you're going to be that 21st century employer of choice, reviews need to happen. And then the final point is all around competition for benefit spend as well. So how can you get the key buy-in from your stakeholders, from your exec, in order to actually revolutionize your benefits? So there's a lot of noise in the workplace and a lot of competition for that hard-earned money in order to get budget sign-off. And how can you get benefits up the agenda? And I still think that in a post-Brexit world, there's still a lot of people sitting on their hands waiting to see what happens. And I think that it is having an impact on the budgets that rewards and HR teams have. So for me, again, Debbie alluded to it earlier, if everyone's getting this right, you can probably have an early lunch, but in the reality, these are the big challenges of the day. Certainly some of the stuff that we're going to cover off today. From my point of view, shameless plug, but we have done our own research as well. So hot off the press, coming out this week on Thursday, we've done our latest edition of our UK Employee Benefits Watch. And this is our research into the industry, where we've gone out to 500 employers in the industry and also got the views of 2,500 employees around what their views and aspirations are for benefits. And the key themes that have come out, and hence the subject of today's session, is all about how the employer and the employee can better connect. And we're seeing that this is now becoming more central to UK benefit initiatives. We know that employers need to review their strategies to remain fit for purpose and to try and get the buy-in from their people, and not just employees now, but also future employees as well. The experience thing is front and center as well. You've got to treat your employees now like consumers, and we're going to look at that in a bit more depth in a moment. But also technology undoubtedly has a central role to play in this. So how can you integrate the different technology platforms you use today in order to provide that better, full-rounded experience? I've touched on Wellbeing already, but what we're seeing is that there are the haves and the have-nots. There's some clear leaders already who are taking this really seriously and trying to move forward with modern times and trying to generate that experience. But there's still a lot of change that needs to happen in the market. So without further ado, how can we actually look to create that connection? So I've looked at this through two different ways. So the first one is all about the employee expectation today. So I think firstly and foremost, we need to say, right, well, why is this important? Why do we need to connect? And I think one of the things you'll probably hear later on today in different sessions is the war for talent is absolutely on. So it's a real acute problem. We're seeing baby boomers, fortunately for them, exiting the industry in their droves. And over the next few years, we'll see millions of people leave the industry and leave employers' workforces, which is obviously going to have a bit of a drain on talent. But also, in terms of key skilled jobs, there's just not enough talent out there right now. So there's a bit of a demand and supply issue in terms of the demand for key skilled labour is the supply is not there. So certainly the power is in employees' hands now when looking for their future jobs. The second thing for me as well is all around cost and productivity. So wellness is absolutely linked to this, because if you think of the cost of lost productivity when it comes to illness, when it comes to absence, whether that's stress or musculoskeletal, whatever it may be, there's a huge drain in cost to employers on this. So if you can get your connection right and get the right wellness strategy in place, you could actually see some tangible returns to the bottom line of the business. The third point is reputation. So if you take organizations like Glassdoor nowadays, it's the shop window to you as the employer. So if I'm a prospective employee looking at a different organization, you can now have a proper delve into, what's the culture like at that organization, what's the benefits program like, what's the management like. So again, there's a real reputational risk to not getting this right. And then the final point is, very briefly, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for your employees. You've got a responsibility to them as your sort of most important asset within the business. So what are employees expecting today? I mean, this isn't a definitive list, but first and foremost, they want benefits that are aligned to their life goals. So we touched upon it before, but things like, getting married, having a child, buying a house for the first time, retirement. But people are still getting this wrong. There's still too many traditional benefit approaches which don't fit what employees actually want. So in our latest research, and Charles Cameron will appreciate me saying this, but 2/3 of employees between the ages of 26 and 35 wanted better support with buying their first property, but actually only 11% of employers were helping people do that. So there's a big disconnect between what employees want and what employers are actually doing. The second thing is flexible working options. We're starting to see this come more and more into the workplace, and Mercer released a global talent trends survey recently, and one of the key things that came out of that was that undoubtedly people want more flexible working options, whether that's hot desking, whether it's working at home, whether it's working in projects, all different manners of working flexibly within the workplace. It's definitely a key aspiration. Wider recognition. It's not just about pay and bonuses now. People want, peer-to-peer recognition, social recognition, and absolutely it's the expectation of the employees nowadays. Support with health and wellness we've talked about, and also personalized experiences. So people want that Amazon, that Uber experience in the workplace. But is that actually happening? I don't think it is right now. And even things down to like the technology that individuals are using in the workplace is a key driver to their experience in terms of how they work on a day-to-day basis. So technology is absolutely front and center. And then the final thing really is the creative and innovative workspaces. I'm sure you've all had conversations with friends, colleagues who work at a real quirky office. And it seems to me if you haven't got a tree house or a slide or a ball pool or something, then you're falling behind the market. But being serious, creative and innovative workspaces can make a difference to employees and their experience. It helps them in the way that they think, in the way that they work. So getting that right is really important. The image on the right-hand side is actually an office that we've opened in Romania for Thomsons, and it shows the types of things that can have a real impact. So whether it's people being able to break out for 5-10 minutes and be able to just switch off from work and then come back into the workplace, really works quite well. So I suppose the ultimate question is, how do you actually connect? So these are the types of things that employees are expecting, but what are you doing, and how can you use benefits to actually to connect with your employees? And I absolutely think that benefits do have a central role in connecting you with your employees. Giving them that richness of benefits is important, but the flexibility that sits around it, the technology that sits around it is also equally important. So if we take the view of the employer, just again some high-level call-outs from the research that we've carried out. So what was really positive to see is that the benefit strategies of most employers are now aligning with the people strategy. So no longer is there that great big chasm between what the people team are doing and what the HR and reward teams are doing. That there is a definite link up between the strategies, which is really, really important. They can't be carried out in isolation. And when we looked at the research, for the first time in a good number of years, the number one sort of focus for employers now is all around attraction and retention of talent. So that has now replaced improving employee engagement as the number one sort of objective for employers going forward. So we had 42% of the respondents saying that they want to improve their attraction and retention within the business. So again, it's probably no great surprise the three headline topics are all of what we're talking about today. But certainly employer thinking, it needs to change, and it has slowly started to change in order to create that connection. Timing is absolutely everything, so making sure that you've carried out frequent reviews. So when we looked at the research, we asked employers if they were to rank their reward plans effectiveness out of 10 in relation to when they last carried out their review. Unsurprisingly, over 80% of employers that have carried out a review within the last 12 months were actually seeing far greater effectiveness within their benefit strategies. You might think, well, it's fresh, it's new, and therefore people are engaged with it, therefore it's more effective. But actually, from our point of view, the world of benefits has definitely shifted away from that sort of traditional approach to a far more flexible, personalised approach. And these reviews which employers are doing right in the here and now are definitely paying dividends. So the question to ask yourselves is, when did you last review your benefits? How is it aligned to the wider business objectives? So if you're carrying out, wider organisational reviews around HR, education, reward, retention, you need to be able to fit benefits firmly in that category. We've talked about data, but actually going through these reviews can provide some real rich and insightful data as well, which will help your ongoing strategy. So often when you do these reviews, there is it can be seen as really heavy lifting stuff, but actually we're not saying that you need to reinvent your benefit strategy every 1-2 years. That might be every 5 or 10 years, but having those frequent check-ins, those MOTs every 6 months, every 12 months, making subtle changes can absolutely make the difference. And then the final thing here is that too many employers are still reacting to market pressures. So things like legislation changes with auto-enrollment or mergers and acquisitions. Don't wait for something to drive you. You need to be on the front step and be proactive in order to take your benefit strategy forward. So in terms of what makes an effective strategy, all of the stuff on the left-hand side here is ultimately the nirvana of where people want to get to. People want greater flexibility and choice around their benefits, how people choose and access their benefits, when they can access them. They want that consumer-grade experience. They want integrated tech, the data and insights, and being able to prove ROI. And that's absolutely the nirvana. That's where people should be heading towards. But the reality is people aren't quite there yet. So you need to take a back step in terms of looking at your overall strategy and say, right, well, what are you looking to achieve? What's the business looking to achieve? Is it growth? Are you looking to add headcount? Are you looking to retain headcount? Are you looking to embed wellness for the first time? Are you looking to control cost? Have a clear and defined strategy in terms of what you're trying to do with the overall benefit strategy. Why is it so important? So, on average, it's the benefit spend is typically about 20% of someone's salary, but actually there's still a huge disconnect between the spend on benefits which people don't actually want, so expensive benefits which people aren't necessarily selecting or choosing. You need to be able to go out, speak to your employees, and make sure that with your limited benefit resources, are you actually striking a chord with your employees? And the key for me is that engagement is absolutely the key to success. So I talked about it earlier on in the presentation, but making sure you've got the right benefit strategy in place. It can be the richest in the world, but ultimately you need to be able to access or give people access and engage your employees at a time that's suitable for them, at the moments that matter for them. So forgive this a very busy slide, but ultimately this is the crux of the matter, is that benefits needs to very much form part of the wider ecosystem within organisations. So if you look at all of the different moving parts to the business and different facets around things like recognition, learning management, payroll, benefit carriers, it's really important and to give people the experience that they receive outside of work and firmly put benefits into that ecosystem. So having that central portal which can speak to payroll, it can speak to HRAS, it can speak to the providers and allow people that sort of central focus to be able to access a fundamental part of their benefit offering and go onto the portal and then ultimately be able to select at a time that suits them, with ease of management, the right benefits for them and their dependents. So absolutely, benefits forms part of the wider ecosystem. Just very conscious of time. Quick focus on well-being. So I'll quickly go through this, but this is teaching grandmother to suck eggs. I think everyone's aware of the different well-being initiatives which exist in the workplace. So it's mental, physical, financial. I'd argue there's probably a fourth, which is social as well. But at the minute, this is absolutely forming part of UK benefit programs, but it's very much working in isolation. So many employers think they've got wellness nailed in terms of, right, well, we've got a pension and we've got an ISA and some education, so that's financial wellness sorted. I've got an EAP around my PMI policy, therefore mental well-being sorted, and so on. But actually, the reality of the matter is that you need to be able to interconnect and identify what the real problems are or where the real pain points are for your employees. So being able to interconnect financial, physical and mental well-being will not only give you a much sort of richer benefit offering, but it will also provide some real data and insight that you can use to formulate your future strategies as well. So if absenteeism is a big problem for the organisation, it could be that, I don't know, financial stress is leading to depression and mental illness, and that's causing someone to be physically unwell as well. So you can't just look at it in isolation. You need to try and identify what the key issues are and try and interconnect the three. So for me, the conundrum, well, there's four parts. The problem, I think, is pretty obvious. There's the perceived demonisation of the workplace, as we've called it. So again, in our research, only 1 in 10 employees said that the workplace had a positive impact on their lifestyle, which is quite a stark stat to me. But obviously, when we look at absenteeism and the fact that 137 million days are lost each year due to sickness, and that mental illness is probably the biggest factor in that. So it's more common now than the common cold and musculoskeletal. Plus 1 in 5 adults are now in debt, and that's leading to financial stress. So 34% of adults are now financially stressed. So all of these different parts are causing a big problem. The response, well, at the minute, it's disparate Me Too wellness offerings. So it's almost saying, right, well, we know there's a problem. We'll just get a corporate ISA, or we'll sort out our pension scheme for financial wellness. And people are confused by the noise in the marketplace as well at the minute. So there's hundreds of different providers coming into the wellness space. We have conversations weekly with different providers, and we're trying to weed out who's actually legitimately in this for the long term and who's trying to make a quick buck. So it's really important to make sure that you don't just bolt on a Me Too wellness offering, as we call it. We've seen dated wellbeing plans or benefit programs playing at wellness. So, assuming that their pension will deal with financial wellness, it just won't do. You need to take a proper view of it. And ultimately, it's not linking directly in with the vision of the business and where you're trying to take your benefits offering to as well. So you need to have a proper strategic view on wellness. So what's needed? Well, support in the moments that matter is what we've said. So, if you're looking to get on the housing ladder, or if you're looking to, get married, you need to be able to give people the ability to actually link to the moments that matter to them. They need to have a clear, defined strategy. So treat it like you would do with your benefits, and have a clear vision to, if you're a business and you've got a problem with absenteeism or sickness, then, if you're trying to reduce that by 15%, what are you going to do to actually achieve that? So have some real demonstrable measurables around this. And ultimately try and use the data and insight to your approach to wellness. So at the minute, it's still quite early days when we look at this, so there isn't a huge amount of data supporting wellness offerings, but actually if you can start to gather and harbour that data, then it can give you a much better approach going forward. So going forward, I think the market is going to mature. We're seeing a lot of new providers and very early adopters to wellness, and it will continue to mature, and propositions will develop. but the key has to be that they need to be interconnected. So you need to be able to break down those silos of wellness, and ultimately you've got to be able to use data to be able to drive that strategy going forward. So what is it you're looking to achieve as a business? How does it link to your wider strategic objectives? And in the final 6 seconds that I have, I'll quickly run through two examples. So Clydesdale Bank were a client of ours who, traditional financial services organisation, wanted to basically revolutionise what they were doing with their employees in order to create a proper brand and to get a proper buy-in. And with Clydesdale, they had a great cascade. So the CEO was the person that actually launched the benefit offering. So we did a huge amount of scheme design work with them to get their benefits offering fit for purpose. And then we linked it to the communications through technology. And we were able to have I think it was 95% login success with it, and 89% of benefits were selected during that first window. So the real thing here was that they took that big step away from what a traditional financial services organisation would ordinarily do. They were brave with it, and they came up with a great brand that connected to their employees. So the results were really important and really welcoming as well. Debbie, do I have to stop?
Sadly, yes.
That was the final, yes. The last thing, the key takeaways. Can I do my key takeaways?
You can do your key
Very
takeaways.
quickly. So flexibility lies at the heart of success. You need to be flexible. That's not rocket science. You need to start thinking more holistically with your benefits offerings. You need to be able to tie it into the wider strategic objectives. Your employees are your consumers now, so you need to give them the experience that they want, the experience that they get in their personal lives. Wellbeing has to be strategic. It can't just be a me-too offering. And the final point, Debbie, you'll be pleased to know, is that quite simply the time is now. You need to start looking at this now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, David.